But the position of the Iranian regime is that Israel shouldn't exist, right?
Well, the position of the British regime is that Israel as an apartheid state should continue to exist. The position of the American regime is that Israel is...
If you could, look, that wasn't the question I asked you, but is the position of Iran's regime...
I'm answering.
That is, but what is the answer to that question?
I'm getting there. The position of the American regime is that apartheid should continue. Iran's position on South Africa had the same gap. There was the same gap back then when the British and the Americans supported apartheid in South Africa and racial supremacism in the South African region, Zimbabwe today, and so on. Back then, Iran was supporting the indigenous population. Back then, Iran supported the ANC. Back then, Iran supported the military wing of the ANC and Nelson Mandela.
But we're not talking about South Africa. I'm talking about what is Iran's regime's current position in relation to Israel?
The Iranians believe that Israel does not have moral legitimacy as an apartheid regime. And the only way that it can gain legitimacy is that if apartheid is cast aside, if ethno-supremacism is cast aside, if racial and religious discrimination in the sense that Muslims and Christians are lesser human beings and they don't have any right to the land that they've been on for hundreds of years, that should be set aside. People who have been expelled have the right of return. It's not very complicated. It's not, as you say, rocket science.
Well, it may not be complicated to you, but what looks complicated to us is that what Iran has been doing in the last few years, if not decades, has been supporting via proxy groups like the Houthis in Yemen, Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, funding and helping to train them to commit acts of war against Israel, firing endless rockets, and as we saw on October the 7th, committing an act of heinous terrorism. So it's not quite as simple as you're trying to picture this, is it? Iran has had a vested interest in supporting terror against Israel for a very long time.
No, I think the regimes that have a vested interest in supporting terrorism are the ones who are giving the Israeli regime the weapons to carry out genocide. And the genocide began long before October the 7th. And the Gaza Strip was a concentration camp long before October the 7th. You know as well as I that October the 7th didn't occur in a vacuum. And the terrorism has been carried out regularly by the Israeli regime on the Palestinians of the Gaza Strip for decades. It regularly bombed them and killed them. And it's not just the Gaza Strip. I think roughly 400 Palestinians have been murdered in the West Bank over the past 6 months. These are regular occurrences, but it doesn't register in the West because, again, the Israelis are European. It's a European colony. They have priorities over the brown people of the land. But it is a fact that Palestinian children, according to the statements made by senior Israeli officials, Palestinian women, according to members of the Knesset, they are lesser people. If you look at the South African complaint, they clearly point out the views of these people and the starvation siege and the intention to starve the people of Gaza, women and children. That is because they look at them as inferior people. This is not about two armies. This is about a subjugated people trying to stand up for their rights. If you were in Germany...
And how would you, let me ask you, Professor, how would you categorize what happened on October the 7th? Was that a terrorist attack?
No, it was a retaliation of a people who were imprisoned and who were starved and who were regularly battered. And people who were imprisoned
just to be clear, you think that the slaughter of 1,200 people, the raping, the maiming, the incinerating, the mass murder that went on that day by a group whose own spokesman, the Hamas spokesman, said days after that on television, on camera, that Hamas was wedded to committing the same act again and again and again, as often as it could, which actually is the purest personification of the genocide that you're talking about. You don't condemn that?
You're being dishonest. There is no evidence.
No, I'm not.
There's no evidence of rape, and I ask your viewers to
absolute
look
nonsense.
Yes,
nonsense.
It's absolute nonsense that there's systematic rape, and if you are being dishonest intentionally, you are helping the Israeli regime continue its genocide by justifying it through dishonesty. So that's up to you to decide. There's no evidence of systematic rape, and just like the beheadings,
there has been clear reported evidence of rape and sexual abuse against Israeli women. Clear, demonstrable evidence.
I refer you and your audience to the good work carried out by people at the Gray Zone, at the Electronic Intifada, based in the United States. Many of them are people of they're excellent reporters, and you should invite them on your show to talk about these allegations.
No, I've talked to top reporters who've covered this.
Well, talk to them too.
I'm also interested that you only. I'm also interested, Professor, that you only want to deny that there was rape. You don't want to deny the incineration or the beheadings or the mass murder of Holocaust survivors, the kidnapping of several hundred people, including babies. I mean, do you condemn any of that, or do you think all of that is justified?
Look, Piers, you're trying to play with words, and that's fine, as long as you're not
what words am I playing with?
You're playing because there is no evidence of beheadings. You're just taking the dishonest Israeli regime's account, which they have no evidence, and people have written articles about this.
There was demonstrable, proven evidence that people were beheaded. Provable evidence. And
so
more than that, we know from Hamas's own video coverage of what they were doing in real time that they proudly broadcast to the world. They didn't try and hide this. I'm just curious why you, who is so incensed by what you see as Israeli genocide, why you would not be equally incensed by genocidal behavior from Hamas that day.
No, you're not being honest, and that's where did they broadcast this footage of beheadings, the Hamas, to the world? Can you put it right now where you have?
I didn't say they broadcast the beheadings. There was evidence found of people who'd been beheaded. That was not broadcast, but what was broadcast was the one. I didn't say there was footage of the beheading. I said there was evidence found that people had been beheaded, right? But I would also say to you that what was broadcast by Hamas of Hamas slaughtering people and kidnapping people, I'm proudly boasting about it. Something you seem to be smirking about. I'm just curious what you feel.
I'm smirking at you.
Why?
Because you are clearly being dishonest. If there were people, innocent people anywhere, whether in Palestine or elsewhere, who were killed by a soldier, by anyone, that is, of course, unacceptable. But then these claims of systematic rape and these claims of these are dishonest claims. People have done hard work to prove that there is no evidence for these systematic rapes and beheadings, and these were used as propaganda to justify the beginning of this Holocaust in Gaza. And those who continue to make these
you talk about me being dishonest, Professor. You talk